This is the Monday, January 25th meeting of the City of Evanston Planning and Development Committee. We have a quorum, and I'd like to ask for approval of the regular minutes of the January 11th, 2016 meeting. Any comments or changes, corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Items for consideration. P1, approval of a contract renewal with Open Communities for 2016 Landlord-Tenant Program. Housing and Homelessness Commission and staff recommend approval of $37,500 renewal grant to Open Communities to continue the Evanston Landlord-Tenant Program. Funds come from the Affordable Housing Fund.
Move approval?
Is there discussion? Alderman Holmes.
Sarah, is there any feedback? I tried to look to make sure I wasn't missing it from residents in terms of their experience with open communities. Because I looked at the figures and I'm trying to pull up the statistics that they gave about the percentages. I think it was like 8% of the
It might be 212, page 212, if you're looking.
okay, maybe info, then going back. They gave a list of experiences that they had had with clients and the referrals that they had, but it was something, one had 8% and one had 7% that I thought was very low in terms of, I'm sorry.
Maybe if I turn my mic on, you could hear me. I'm sorry. Hadn't turned it on from the last meeting. Give me 1 second, Sarah. I can just find it. No, Alderman Rainey isn't 12.
What about 208? There's a list on 208.
See, that's why I was looking down. I thought it was about 214 too, but I went back because Alderman Rainey said 212. It
212.
yeah.
214, there is 8% of referrals, that 8% of people will get referred some of their.
Absolutely, that's exactly where I'm trying to get to, yes.
It is 214.
It is 214. I thought I was in the right area. Yes, that to existing or appropriate services, I think that they made them. And then there was a 7% that I guess they took care of within in-house. Is that correct?
Yes. Excuse me, I should have introduced myself. Sarah Flax, Housing and Grants Administrator. The 7% get referred to other open community services, which could include their home sharing program. It could include fair housing, if it's really fair housing, not just a landlord-tenant. So the bulk of their calls and their contacts really are for education and advice directly related to landlord-tenant, but they also refer to either their own programs or to others as appropriate if they are outside of that.
Do they report to you in terms of their experiences with the residents that have the complaints with the landlords? In terms of, are they satisfied with the way in which they're working? That's what I couldn't find. I was looking for that.
What we have is, the number of people who are by what type of issues, and in most cases, Open Communities is able to resolve whatever that is. In many cases, it's providing advice. For example, they may need help on how to request repairs. They may need help on all those things, and all of those are tracked. And I can check with Oliver to see if he has a percentage that are resolved entirely. Maybe he can add that. Oliver? Oliver Jury is our primary person who does the landlord-tenant, and he can give you more feedback on exactly what they do and the kind of response they get from the residents. I can tell you from a anecdotal, it's very positive because I have people coming in saying, I need to talk to Oliver or I need to talk to Brendan. So they really play a vital role in all this. So if you can.
Thank you, Sarah. So I think the question related to how effective are we being with the actual landlord and tenant services. So I can speak specifically to the tenant experiences, I think, in the city of Evanston. And I would say that without that in front of me, it is a large majority of tenants whom we serve. And out of those tenant populations, I would say the vast majority, and I would have to crunch the numbers at the office, probably upwards of 85 or 90% are things that are resolved in one or two sort of instances of work. That small percentage that goes on or carries through are reflected in that 8% that we refer to outside attorneys and things like that. I do make mention of some of the work that I'm most proud of, I think, through this grant, and that's when we can connect not only with education for those tenants and for anyone else in the building who are having similar issues, but because we have an attorney on staff, that sort of gives us the connections in the community that we need to facilitate legal assistance where I'm not authorized to do that. And because we have Netta on our staff, she's our new director of fair housing, those referrals are happening at a much more accelerated rate. So I will say that the program has taken a great leap forward in that respect. As far as specific numbers of satisfied clients, I certainly wouldn't be able to tell you right now.
Well,
but thank you.
Okay. One of the things that concerns me is reoccurring issues with what trouble landlords' buildings. And I'm not even sure some of those even get there because sometimes I think people just don't make those complaints anymore. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens with them. But I'm real concerned about those areas.
Yeah, if I can, two comments on that briefly. The instances of sort of repeated problems at properties sort of stem, I think, or the way that we sort of work on those is sort of multifaceted. And I think the first and the only one that open communities can really deal with is sort of the housing related crisis and making sure that those individuals are being educated in the proper way and are acting appropriately according to their situation. I think a lot of other factors outside of the control of open communities, like just the status of being low income or limited resources and those type of things, are something that we as a staff and as an organization are working sort of to develop more holistic solutions, because I don't like seeing a lot of cases that come back from the same property or from the same relationship, for instance. But I will tell you that number, as something that we've looked at, is going to be part of some work that we have a research assistant working on in the coming 12-month cycle. But it's not something that I have the time to sort of analyze, but it is something that we are concerned about.
Okay, good. Great.
Alderman Rainey?
Don't go away. Well, I like page 212 because that lists the case types by volume. And I see right here, the two largest types of complaints are lease concerns and pest problems. Then there is, let's see, what is that one? Then subletting is another.
Actually, I think it's lease concerns and eviction related.
And eviction
That's
related,
right.
right.
Eviction is the largest.
And pest problems are pretty, is that orange, the pest?
That's
Orange is 37, yeah.
The point I'm getting ready to make is, do you regularly refer things to our property standards people, to our health department, et cetera?
Oh, absolutely. So my work with the health department has actually increased considerably recently with the work that I've done with Carl Caniva and Sue Pontarelli at 311. And in that vein, we're allowing city staff to refer cases directly to me that are outside the scope of city work, particularly within the health department. And then from my angle, being able to go right back immediately within 311's system, or just through my connections with the staff here being here once a week, I can get cases like pest problems or electrical concerns, utility shutoffs directly back to the city. And so that turnaround time, I think, has decreased considerably, and that's something that we're trying to expand as much as possible.
Okay, 164 cases or calls. It says cases, so I'm assuming 164 cases having to do with eviction.
Yeah, that's right. In that 12-month cycle, we handled 164 different cases where eviction was in process, threatened, or on the table.
All right. And how do you analyze those cases?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we want to look for in every individual case related to eviction has to deal specifically with what we're doing and what is best for that individual based on what their needs are and what's provided for in Evanston's ordinance. And so one of the key things that we're monitoring is what's happening in that situation in accordance with Evanston's residential landlord and tenant ordinance, and is what it is that we're capable of providing them, whether that's referral or analysis, is that commensurate with their need. So are they looking to remain in the property, and is that feasible? And then we go from there.
All right. What is the main reason for your eviction cases? Is it lack of payment or something else?
Yeah, generally it's lack of payment or falling behind, loss of job, things like that.
Or just not paying or what?
Yeah, or simply withholding for some other reason.
And what's your success ratio in resolving one way or another? I mean, what's happening?
Well, in a lot of the eviction cases, I think what we're seeing is that 164 is not nearly sort of indicative of the amount of cases and individuals, families, things like that are being displaced by eviction, at least that are coming through Open Communities lens. What often occurs, I think, more.
Wait. But when I see that you say case types by volume and you say 164, it is correct that those are at least the cases having to do with eviction that come to you. You can't possibly know the number of
No,
evictions
absolutely.
in our town.
But I will say that the ones that do come to us are often solved unless the issue is significantly outside the scope of being able to restore the situation. Whether that's connecting them with services. Oftentimes, we work really closely with social service agencies, including Evanston Emergency Assistance, to keep people from leaving a property when it's just they lost their job or they were in the hospital for a few weeks and missed 1 month's rent. So we're able to stem the flow of that in those situations. But more often, we're also dealing with situations where individuals are hard-pressed to find other opportunities as far as affordable housing is concerned and those type of things, because they can't continue paying at the rate that they're paying for whatever reason. Generally, that's a loss of income. And so in those situations, we're working with, that's when you're seeing some of those cases that we're referring to home sharing or things like that, other programs for affordable housing to make sure that those people aren't losing their property because they lose a job and then end up homeless or displaced.
How frequently do you get a tenant who's been given a 5-day notice by an Evanston landlord?
I would say it probably happens once every couple months.
Think that there's a lack of understanding that you need a 10-day notice?
Yeah, I definitely think that that's part of it.
What do you guys do about that? I mean,
Well-
is there something we can do about that to help?
I think it's part of the education campaign that we're working with. So at each annual landlord training or every landlord that I call, Open Communities has actually started weaving in landlord-tenant work specifically when we're doing fair housing trainings to property management agencies here in Evanston. And so that's something we're trying to weave in because a lack of understanding, I think we see that pretty rampantly. And so combating that and making sure that things are done properly is the first step to making sure that the relationship doesn't start off on a bad foot. So when something goes wrong, it's actually being dealt with in the proper way, and then we can go from there, as opposed to having argue about sort of semantics.
Are you in any way involved with the nuisance properties?
So one of the staff members that we have, our director of organizing and advocacy, Brendan, who does some landlord and tenant work, and who's probably been here in my position in years past, handles a lot of that. And so he's looking and working with Sarah as far as that's concerned.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Are there any questions? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next item, P2. City staff recommends adoption of Ordinance 11016 to modify the location of the previously approved 70-foot-high concrete plant building where a maximum of height of 60 feet is allowed in the I-3 General Industrial District. A major variation was approved for this project on September 21st, 2015 for Orzinga RMC at 2525 Oakton Street. City staff found the revised proposal meets all standards for variations. This is for introduction.
Move approval.
Is there discussion?
It'll be a nice compliment to the sports dome.
A lot of walls are going up. Yeah. Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Item P3, the Zoning Board of Appeals and City staff recommended adoption of Ordinance 10016 granting special use approval for a baseball scoreboard at Rocky Miller Park and a softball scoreboard at Sharon Drysdale Field for Northwestern University at 1501 Central Street. The applicant has complied with all zoning requirements and meets the standards for special use in the U2 University Athletic Facilities District. This is for introduction. I know that we have a presentation by the university. I think also some of you, if you came in late and you'd like to speak to this, anyone else in the audience who would like to speak to this, we have a sign-in sheet so we have your information and can call you up at the appropriate time.
You want a second?
Yeah, is there anyone that would care to sign this? Okay.
Do you need a second for the?
That's it. Thank you.
Chair. Yep, I'm Charles Davidson with Northwestern University, the applicant for the Rocky Miller and Sharon Drysdale softball scoreboard. With me also is Brian Baptiste from Athletics, who oversees operations of the facility. Up on the screen, I have the presentation. The first half of what's on the screen is very similar to what you have in your packet. I'll move through it rather quickly, and I'll spend a little bit more time with the second half of the packet, which we modified some information based on a meeting we had a week ago with neighboring residents. So a quick overview. We're looking at two scoreboards, one for the Rocky Miller baseball facility and one for the Sharon Drysdale softball facility. Both are located on our athletics facility out on Central Street, the baseball fronting the Isabella side, and the Rocky Miller softball really enclosed within the campus. Real quick, this is the outline of the Rocky Miller scoreboard. It is a 24 by 36 scoreboard. It's actually 21 feet of LED scoreboard and a 3-foot marquee across the top. The lower portion is our existing scoreboard, which is 13 by 30. Sharon Drysdale, very similar, just smaller dimensions. The existing scoreboard is 10 by 28, and the new scoreboard is 1625. This scoreboard will be constructed directly on our Welsh Ryan facility. This is some technical information which we submitted to DAPR regarding the use of the scoreboard and the LED. Part of our application, and these next couple of slides have been circled through DAPR, ZBA, and also with the neighbors. We did a pictorial of the views and how the scoreboard can be seen from the public right-of-way. This would be Dupuy Street, and in any one of these slides, it's clear that some parts of the scoreboard are visible, but it is mostly going to be obstructed by different items in and along the right-of-way. So this is the alley behind Jenks Street. This is 4th Street, viewing the current condition with the what was taken in early November. It's Duby. Thank you. This is the view from 4th Street looking south. This is a view from the intersection of Isabella and Ashland. And this is going further west where the views will be completely obstructed due to its distance from the facility. So this view was, some of the questions that we had in presenting this over the last 6 weeks was what's it going to look like, what it looked like before and what will it look like afterwards. And this picture was taken, I grabbed it out of Google Views. This was what it looked like in 2011 before the baseball project. Right now we're currently under construction with our baseball facility out there, so we're kind of in a continuum to get this project developed, so things are in transition. This is a view, again, from Isabella Street, and so some of the landscaping that is currently out there on Isabella. This will be relevant as we go through the slides, and we'll start to show you how the corridor of Isabella is going to develop with this project. As I stated, this is a photo from 2011. So what it looked like before the baseball project. One of the challenges with any project is the continuum of work that goes, and this is being presented after the baseball project is under construction. This is our rendering of the scoreboard. Our rendering shows what the baseball facility is currently being constructed to. In the upper right-hand corner, you can see the proposed scoreboard. To the right of what's called a batter's eye, and if you're not familiar, a batter's eye is it's kind of a black backstop that keeps helps the batter view the outfield. On your left, going up Isabella Street, is 3 numbers, 1, 2, and 3, and those are the next slides that you'll see. This slide kind of shows, as we develop the baseball project, this project, as well as a future project not presented here, how the overall Isabella corridor is going to change with these projects. As you saw from the previous slides, the right-of-ways undeveloped, and there's a mixture of some landscaping in there on both sides. So as we develop this project along with the other projects, you can see how we're working through and developing a new right-of-way for Isabella, and really a different corridor. We're going to have sidewalks connecting the two properties from Ashland all the way to the alley to the east, as well as a future project where we're going to have sidewalk connecting to the west to the alley. So as I said, this is one of the views from Isabella. The location is up in the upper view number 1, east of 5th Street. And you can see it'll be, the proposed scoreboard will be completely obstructed by one of our proposed buildings that's under construction. This is looking at it east of 5th Street. With the proposed landscaping that we have in the corridor, and for the most part, depending on when and the time of the year, the scoreboard will be partially obstructed. Again, as we move down, we have landscaping throughout the Isabella corridor, and we have some, proposed landscaping that we're to use to obstruct that facility. The next slides continue our, view down Isabella. You can see that we have, a little bit different angle here. You can kind of see how, what was there before in the earlier photographs and how this comes together. This is the view from 4th Street. This slide's relevant as we go further. Based on our meeting we had last week with the residents, we had a discussion about slightly relocating the scoreboard to help improve the view of 4th Street, which we studied. It'll be one of the last slides I show you. Continuing down Isabella Street. And now we're all the way at the east end of our property. So leading up to these, as we develop these slides and we've developed our overall response to the neighbors and some of the requests, we've adapted the scoreboard from our early meetings with DAPR to the ZBA. We've lowered the scoreboard. And now, in the next slide, we've also looked at relocating the scoreboard further to the south and further to the west to help work with some of the views that some of the neighbors had concerns with as it relates to the 4th Street corridor. 4th Street just looks directly south, so we relocated the scoreboard a little bit further to the east to help with that view. But meanwhile, being, behind all that landscaping that we're proposing for Isabella. And, this is the landscape plans that support that. And that concludes what I have for the overall presentation. If there's any questions.
Alderman Fisk.
Thank you. I know you want to get to citizen comment. I'm curious, how many Evanston residents are affected by this and how many Wilmette residents? Do you know what the percentage is? And
Well, we sent out a mailing to all surrounding neighbors. That was last Monday. On the 19th, we had a meeting with them. 15 residents appeared. 3 were Evanston residents and 12 were from Wilmette.
okay.
Those are those that attended. I don't know exactly how you would how you'd address the actual number.
Okay. A couple of questions. Is the advertising necessary? We did the tennis scoreboards down on Sheridan Road, and that was, that worked out well, except you haven't planted the ivy yet.
Didn't take.
It didn't take. Okay, we'll try again this spring then for the ivy. But is the size of the advertising really necessary? Could you reduce the size of the scoreboard by eliminating or reducing some of the advertising?
So I think the advertising that you see in those renderings, those are just examples of advertising. Those aren't fixed advertising. So the scoreboard wouldn't have fixed sponsors on there. That's just an example of in-game where you have the ability to see. So that's not a fixed sponsorship or advertising on the scoreboard.
Okay. And then the scoreboards would only be in use during games, correct? The rest of the time they would be turned off?
Correct.
Are they used during practice or any other time?
No, they probably won't be used in practice because you have to have personnel to be able to run the scoreboards and various things. So
And when the scoreboards are off, then they're dark?
yeah,
Is
they're
that
completely black.
okay? All right.
Mark Munzer. Sorry.
Hi, Mark Munzer, Director of Community Development. Could you go, just to, probably for the conversation, go back to the image of the baseball scoreboard and put that up on the screen? Thank you.
Do we want to get citizen comment before we get into our community discussion, or would you like to hear?
I had some questions, Mark.
Sorry?
I had some questions.
Yes, I see. Okay. Yeah, I think we could let citizen comment.
Well, I'd like to ask just now.
Sure. Okay. We'll do that.
I wanted to follow up on what Alderman Fisk was asking about. Is the advertising necessary for the sign? I mean, I know that you said it won't be fixed, but do you have to have advertising on the sign? What? No, I'm just wondering, because I wondered about that when I looked at it. Do you have advertising on all your scoreboards? I know, obviously, with the football, you probably do.
Right, I think part of the sponsorship entitlements that you see come with in-game promotion. So usually that would be, this is just showing an example of a various layout. So it may be in between the 5th and the 6th inning, there's a promotion that's sponsored by Buffalo Wild Wings, and Buffalo Wild Wings will have their logo, but that wouldn't be something that would be fixed on the scoreboard, during the competition. So we're talking about very, limited time.
So it's episodically during the games? Okay, all right, now I understand. And then my other question was about the landscaping. I see you have your landscaping plan here, and I think it looks like a good landscape plan, obviously, but one of the things I wanted to ask about is to what level of, when will we see that, that you have shown up here in the elevations, that level of size of tree? Because, you can plant a very small tree and 8 or 10 years from now, it'll look like the architect's renderings. So that's my question, because I think that's really important that Northwestern, which obviously has done a good job with the variety you have here, that you plant the largest, most viable plants that you can.
Okay. So we're going to schedule the landscaping that we purchase with our submittal to the building department. We'll look to getting mature trees from the nurseries, but, really it's limited to the availability of what's in the nursery. So we'll look to get, a larger caliper tree. But ultimately that is going to be our resource in size. So ultimately, what you're seeing in these renderings, from my landscape architect's perspective, ultimately this could be 10 years before, it matures up to a certain height and level. But, as we plan this out, we're looking at both deciduous and conifer trees, so we get that cover throughout the season.
Right. But I think actually you can, if you plan in advance and talk to nurseries, and obviously you're probably a large purchaser, you can reserve a certain level of caliper tree. The city of Evanston does that all the time. We don't plant 2-inch caliper trees.
And nor would we.
Right.
Right.
So
We would look for more of a, but there's a limit to what the nurseries have. So if it's 3-inch or 4-inch, we'll look to see what they have.
Right.
And
I
we'll
know,
put that
I'm-
into our specifications.
No, and my point, though, is that I think you can do some planning in advance so that you can plant towards the higher end of that. And that's what I think we would expect from Northwestern, that it look towards the largest, most viable that you can plant. And I think if you talk to nurseries in advance, because obviously you're planning this, then you can arrange to have those trees available to you when you're ready to plant.
So we'll do that, and we'll take the schedule that we have submitted in this application, and we'll see what's available for a spring, early summer delivery.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Holmes, would you like to ask your question now?
Just wanted to know the limit of the season, the time period of the season.
Time period of the season.
So
I just couldn't.
our first home match is March 30th, and we usually conclude in the month of May. So we're talking about 18 games for baseball and 13 games for softball this year.
We will have more questions for you, but I'd like to hear from residents now. We have 2 speakers signed up. Is that correct? The first speaker is calling, I'm sorry? Celine Peru. Okay. I'm 0 for 3. I'm out.
No one can do it.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Can you
Thank you for
state
the
your name
opportunity
on
to speak
in the
to you.
microphone?
I am Celine Puri Hisong, and I live on the 100 block of 4th Street in Wilmette. And the letters that we've written, I know are included in your packet, but I'd like to highlight some points. We really disagree with that all the zoning requirements and special use standards have been met by this project. The video scoreboard will most certainly cause a negative cumulative effect on our neighborhood. No professional evaluations of the impact on property values have been conducted regarding the impact it will have on the adjacent properties. No professional evaluations have been conducted regarding the impact it will have on traffic congestion and safety when the sign is lighted and in use. To say that this will have no impact is unsubstantiated. Regarding the renderings that were shown in your packet, page 275 does not show the sidewalk. It's a photo from 2011, and all of those trees have been cut down. The earlier renderings that are in the packet, earlier than some of the revisions that were shown here on pages 276 and 289, do not show all the buildings on the site. That corner is not open as it was originally depicted. There's another building there, and the grandstand appears to be closer to the street than is shown. Pages 276 through 297 are simply a fantasy. It states in there in teeny tiny print that those plantings, as you mentioned, are at a 10-year maturity. At best, it won't look like this until 2026, if indeed Northwestern does install this type of landscaping. I cannot wait that long, and I wonder if any of you could. In a realistic depiction, these would look like twigs with it, and the landscape architect last week said it was based on a 3-inch caliper that was going to be planted. And in 10 years, in 2026, the technology of that screen will be obsolete. The renderings are not shown at scale, and in an aerial view that is shown, they do not accurately illustrate how the sign is going to appear once it's installed and lit from the vantage points up 4th Street, Isabella, 5th Street, and Dupee. You have to have perspective. We're not going to be able to see, that screen will loom over those trees even at full planting. The football practice field that's east of the baseball stadium is little used. It's being moved to the lakefront with the new building that's going on there. And until then, it could be adequately protected by wrapping or fencing the posts. Seeing the back of a scoreboard has got to be preferable to having a lighted video screen in one's window. The Rocky Miller scoreboard would not impact on the properties to the west, as they did say they are far enough away that the other new structures that are being built there and the large parking lot will obscure that view. But the closer properties on the streets in the residentially zoned adjacent neighborhood to the north will be adversely impacted, and this is in contravention to Evanston's own comprehensive general plan. There is no benefit to our community, and Northwestern ignores these concerns. A neighbor suggested the compromise of moving the scoreboard to east and left field. Any additional cost for moving the video screen in Northwestern's $15 million project budget could have been avoided had they consulted with or informed the neighbors at the outset of this project nearly 2 years ago. The argument that all the Big Ten schools have one sounds like my kids saying to me, well, all the other kids have one. That's just not a good enough reason. None of the other Big Ten schools have their athletic fields situated within a quiet, non-university residential neighborhood. The ordinance drafted in your packet omits the ZBA prohibition against sound. Basically, we think this is in contravention of Evanston City Code, Chapter 10, Section 410.8, that states, signs not to constitute traffic hazards. In order to ensure reasonable traffic safety, it shall be unlawful to erect or maintain any flashing sign or attention-getting device. No sign or advertising structure, nor its associated landscaping shall be erected, installed, or maintained in such a manner as to obstruct or distract the attention of the driver of any vehicle by any reason of position, shape, color, or lighting thereof. And also in section 41010H-1, scoreboards, location, no scoreboard shall be erected or maintained that is visible from a public thoroughfare. This is simply unnecessary. It poses way too many negative requests. Please just say no. Thank you very much, and I have some photos that are current that I think I have.
Thank you. Mr. Munzer here. Next speaker is Laurel Sheffer.
Laurel Schaefer. I'm also in the 100 block of Isabella in Wilmette, and I really appreciate you letting us speak. I do have, because it's so hard to follow, I do have a packet for the aldermen. Most of the photos were in, there's just 3 photos actually, and 2 of them were in the just so they can follow. I have sort of a visual. I attended the ZBA meeting back on December 15th, and I thought that the reason I'm appearing is that the ZBA was not given complete information from Northwestern regarding the visual impact of the scoreboard and the true scale of the structure. I would like to give you my visual presentation that shows the special use scoreboard will cause a negative cumulative effect, will diminish property value of the neighborhood, will cause undue traffic congestion, and will not preserve significant natural and environmental features. The first photograph in the packet is actually from your 311 website, which is marvelous. And it shows the tax assessor's photo taken in 2007. And it's actually April 2007. Now, we all appreciated the fantasy of having a lovely leafed out, beautiful site that's going to block all of the screens. But unfortunately, all of us who live in Chicago know that the trees don't leaf out until almost the end of May. This picture is taken on the 10th of April. There are no leaves on the trees. This is one of the lovely trees that was cut down on the property. You notice it's about 10 feet tall. It's about 20 years old. Not a leaf on the tree. The second picture is this was in your packet, but didn't print very well. This is a rendering of what the scoreboard will look like if you're driving down 4th Street. Mr. Davidson did not acknowledge how the screen would beam into our 17 or 25 neighborhood homes from the stadium. There was not one view in that packet that showed our homes from Isabella. This is looking toward the stadium from our homes. The screen is 34 feet high. Our homes are 30 to 34 feet high. Our first floors are 6 feet off the ground. The vantage points that Mr. Davidson shows in his photographs is from maybe a crouching sign, so you're looking up like this and you think you see the fence. We're 6 feet above that fence. This is really, our second floors are 16 stories. We are going to see this scoreboard unless you plant full-grown sequoias. You cannot hide a sign that's taller than the houses. It will take 15 years just to hide the street-level views with landscaping. We will endure 4 to 5 hours a day for 19 days, 10 of which are weekend days, of your giant video screen from 1 or 3 p.m. until dusk. Traffic will be impacted with cars stopping on 4th Street or Isabella. You're driving right down, and this is what you're seeing. Isabella is a main thoroughfare and artery, and 4th Street is an emergency evacuation route. This is a traffic situation waiting to happen. These two pictures are not included in your packet. I think one of them might be in the original packet. These are scale renderings of what the screen will look like from 4th Street. This first one is taken from the first floor at 400 Isabella. When he's looking out his window, this is the real scale. This is what he is going to see for 4 or 5 hours. The renderings that were shown in your presentation were not to scale. They had no realization. This is, I think, what the ZBA asked for, was a scale drawing of what we would see from our houses. So that's number one. Number two, this screen has been moved around a lot, so I tried to show, this was the original placement of the screen. You can see the old screen here. This is what was moved to on the 19th. I didn't quite understand where you were moving it, but the scale will still tell you where it is. The batter's eye is over here. This is, I took this the other day, I was standing on the corner, I'm not that tall, 5'7", standing on the corner at 4th and Isabella. This is the scale that you're going to be able to see. This is what we all need to know is really out there. This will impact, I'm sorry, I got lost here. Do you want a home that looks into a 24 by 36 foot screen for a quarter of the year? This is a quarter of the year that they're playing these games. This will impact the value of our homes. The third photo that's in your packet is one that Mr. Davidson chose to show. And the reason I put it in there is there are electrical lines that aren't shown in the renderings. You can see there's one very low line, and you can see what the height of these trees. These are 25-year-old trees that are in this drawing. The power company comes through every year and trims them because there are major electrical lines that affect all of our houses. These trees and the trees that were shown in Mr. Davidson's fantasy will never be any taller than this because they have to trim them and keep them down. There's a reason for this. We don't want, the power company not to be able to come and work on them. But these are 25-year-old growth trees already. Lastly, did anyone check with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources to see if the scoreboard would be a nuisance to wildlife? I don't know if we have any birders here, but the NU Field is a migratory path for geese, gulls, starlings. I've watched the fields for years, and that's why NU has a plastic coyote in its practice field to try to keep the birds away. Will the birds fly into the screen? This is not the way to preserve significant natural and environmental features. The cumulative effect of the variances in this special use variance will have a negative cumulative effect on our neighborhood. That's all I have to say. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you. It appears we have a few more speakers. Tracy Pinchman, is that correct? Thank you. Could you
Thank you very much.
Could you repeat your name to them?
Yes, my name is Tracy Pinchman.
Tracy, thank you.
I live at the corner of Dupuy and Isabella Place. The first notice I got from Northwestern about the scoreboard was 3 days ago, when a letter arrived in my house saying, gee, we're sorry. It seems like we left out a whole bunch of neighbors. We're letting you know now. That was the first notice I got. My entire block got about the scoreboard going up from Northwestern. Luckily, other neighbors had sent an email around letting us know about it, but we did not hear it from Northwestern itself. My own experience of living near Northwestern is that it has been a very disingenuous neighbor. It has not played honestly or fairly with us who live in the community. I've lived in my home for 12 years. I have children. And if this 34-foot scoreboard goes in, that means my daughter sitting in her bedroom is going to have Coca-Cola flashing in her eyes, signs advertising Coca-Cola for 32 games every April, March, April, and May. Sitting in my living room, I'm going to have that flashing in my eyes. Has there been any study of what that does for children's brains if they have these things flashing at them in their homes where they can't escape them? What I look at right now is not those beautiful trees that they said are there. Those aren't there. I look at barbed wire and an ugly, rusting, chain-link fence. I don't see a scoreboard as an improvement of that. I don't think the neighbors or our children's health and safety or our health and safety have been taken into account in any way. This is going to be an enormous distraction for anybody driving down the street. What happens to all the children playing in their neighborhood when you've got people being distracted by those signs and the kids are being distracted? How many kids are going to end up getting hit by cars? Has anybody done any kind of traffic study to see what impact that's going to have? There are kids in every house on my block. So I just ask you to take these things into consideration. There has been some disingenuousness, in my view, in this presentation, that this is going to be a harmless scoreboard. It's going to enhance fans' experience of the games, but there has been no talking about what it's going to do to those of us who are going to be looking at it for a quarter of the year, or what it's going to do to our children.
Thank you. The next person is it Cardis? Is that Kagan? I'm sorry, if you could repeat your name into the
My name is Carol Kagan, and I live in the 200 block of 4th Street in Wilmette. I understand Northwestern has always made a big show of saying that they are a good neighbor. That may be true with regard to Evanston, but my personal experience is that that does not extend to the other side of Isabella Street. And there's not a lot we can do about it since we do not live in Evanston, don't vote in Evanston, don't pay taxes in Evanston. But I am just here to give witness to the fact that I never got a notice. I live a block and a half from the scoreboard. We never got any notice, any more than we ever get notices about when football games are or anything else from Northwestern. It's generally been completely silent. I did not find out about this meeting until my neighbor told me this about an hour ago. And the only thing we can ask of you is to be better neighbors than Northwestern is, and please consider the impacts on the other side of Isabella. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill French?
My name's Bill French. Thank you very much for hearing us out. I can't really add much to what my distinguished colleagues have said, and the football season has a big enough impact, but over the years I've made my peace with it. I live at Dupuy and Isabella. But generalizing from that, the whole expansion project into the baseball season, so we're not just talking about a massive impact on the Wilmette community along the Isabella Carter during one season. It's really 6 months now if you add the whole baseball thing in. So I'd simply urge a sense of let's balance the values here and the enhancement of fan pleasure. Well, that's true, but this isn't professional baseball, and there's plenty of enjoyment in the game itself. So I would urge you to consider doing anything with the scoreboard to minimize the impact on the neighborhood and the families along the Isabella Carter. We're deeply concerned about the traffic It's bad enough during football season. My son is late for certain appointments because of congestion, and the property values will surely be taking a hit, especially if there's not protection about minimizing the visual and also the decibel level of the PA system. It's another detriment to a community. Thank you.
Thank you. There was one name, Carlos Sutton. Were you here to speak about NU scoreboard? I think not. Okay, that's all we have for citizen comment. At this time, we'll discuss it among ourselves. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you. To Northwestern, what was the, Charles, I guess, maybe, what was proposed in terms from the residents in terms of a location that might be more acceptable to them? And what would that location work for you?
The location that was proposed, it first came up during the ZBA meeting with the potential for locating the scoreboard in left field as opposed to right field. And as staff noted as well as ourselves, locating it in left field would put it out sort of where that white fence is along the northern part of the property. There's a number of infrastructure concerns that we have with locating it there, as well as the greater impact it would have to the residents directly to the east, the apartment building, that would directly front them. And it was also, it would front Isabella in a greater way than the way the scoreboard currently fronts the existing buildings to the south.
Is the building just to the east, is that a Northwestern-owned dormitory or
No, it's not. I
residential?
believe it's a private condominium or apartment building.
Oh, is it? Okay. That's what I thought it was originally, a National College property. Well, I would certainly like to try to find a location that doesn't have such an impact on the neighborhood like we did in the tennis courts. And the back of the sign that we ended up with at the tennis courts actually looks quite nice from the alley, and I haven't had any complaints since we did relocate that from the neighbors on Orrington. So I'm wondering if there's something like that that you can do that would mitigate the problems for these neighbors.
The location we have right now, in my professional opinion, is the one that mitigates it the most. Because by putting the scoreboard in its current location with the existing buildings as the backdrop, it is a screen. It's a natural, there's that screen back there. And by the ideas of relocating it out into the frontage and bringing it towards Isabella, I guess that kind of brings it right out into neighbors that, some of the neighbors that are here today have direct concerns with 4th Street. I sympathize with them, but the neighbors that aren't here, the Evanston neighbors, the apartment buildings, they did come and speak at our town hall meeting we had a week ago, and they had direct concerns with relocating it further to left field and bringing it out from that location.
Okay.
Alderman Wilson.
So, and obviously it's going to be in right center field, right?
Center, yeah, that's correct.
So, it's my vast knowledge of baseball.
Further right, you can see its location. We're working with the neighbors in Wilmette and those that came up. We've met with them, and so at our meeting.
Hello.
At our meeting we had last week.
Ned, this is not acceptable behavior. We'll have to ask you to leave if you can't sit there and just like the rest of us have a discussion. Thank you.
Right. I'd appreciate not being interrupted, and I would appreciate the answers not being interrupted. No one interrupted the other speakers.
Alderman Wilson, this site plan kind of is, depicts where we've relocated. Based on our meeting we had last week with the town hall meeting, the scoreboard originally was a little bit further to the north and a little bit further to the east, which would have been more in line with the 4th Street, which had a laser pointer, and I pointed to. Some of their concerns, as you heard them speak, is really the 4th Street view and how that sight line captures the scoreboard. We were able to move it further down, and what's not shown in this one, but if you would take a moment to look to see where it is in right field, and none of these, obviously this screens it, but it shows, the buildings. Let me go back to some of the photos. Like this photo, that's our buildings back there that it would be up against.
And I guess part of what I was getting at was that It's going to face the grandstand, obviously. That's who it's
We have
directed to.
we have certain sight lines that we need to preserve for
Right.
for the.
So if you're on 4th Street, coming down 4th Street towards Isabella, and you're looking at it, you're not going to be looking at it dead on. I think some of the renderings we were given had a view where it was looking at the
Right, and
sign dead on.
we've revised that?
Right. It would be
Based
more
on
like a
citizen
45-degree angle, or whatever. It'll be at an angle.
It'll be at an angle. I don't have that angle for you. That's part of our application here in this drawing.
Right. Okay.
So it is at an angle, and it is at an angle to, anything east of 4th Street would be slightly behind it. And then the areas directly facing it would be screened by the actual baseball facility.
And if you were to put it in left field, right at the corner, for example, the buildings or the homes at the corner of Isabella and 4th Street, they would still have a view of it. It would be
the direct view.
Right. It would be right there, and it'd be a lot closer.
Right, and as well as it would be out there, directly out there for the residents, who would be a backdrop to the apartment building to the east.
Right. The ones east of 4th would have the view of the back, but the ones on the other side would have a much closer view of the front of it.
The distance we have from Isabella allows us to utilize that landscape screening.
Okay.
Alderman Fisk?
Thank you. Is it possible that you can bury the utilities to allow the planting of taller trees? I know that when we have utilities like that, we keep the plantings low underneath.
Again, so let me address that. This photograph here, first of all, the utilities aren't Northwestern's utilities. They're part of the, Evanston franchise that ComEd brings, and it serves power to the east. It does serve our facility, but we have power coming from multiple locations. So these aren't necessarily our power lines or the community's power lines.
Right, but I think they might, ComEd or whoever's lines these are might be open to you're helping to pay to bury them.
Let me address the concern our neighbors have with the power lines and the landscaping. Currently, the power lines are just off the curb line and run inside the public right-of-way. The landscaping that we're proposing in part of this project, we've taken the landscaping and pushed it to the further south of this area. The landscaping has always been limited in the public right-of-way because of the height of the power lines.
Mm-hmm.
The landscaping that we've talked about earlier, the larger trees, the shade trees, the deciduous and evergreen, we're looking to plant those south of the power line so we can get the full growth. They will not be under the control of a ComEd contractor for maintenance. They will be our trees under our control for maintenance.
Okay.
And this rendering helps depict that, as you can see how the power lines moves along the Isabella corridor.
Thank you.
And then that's further supported by the landscape plan we submit, where we show how the sidewalk and the area to the north has those smaller trees. Everything to the south, we're having planting on our property, which doesn't have that overhead power.
I, too, had a bit of a concern about that. I mean, just as a matter of aesthetics, you don't see this kind of thing in Evanston. I know there are programs to go to work with our contractors to bury them. We've done it in our residences. We've done it in our alleys, in certain other places. As these trees mature, these lines would become more vulnerable to branches and other things. But I think, just as a matter of aesthetics, if there are changes to be made, this would be certainly a way of adding some improvement, that I think everyone could appreciate. So that was one of my concerns as well.
Thank you.
Sorry, Alderman Nguyen.
Yes, thank you. No, I think the residents have a point, though, that if the season is in March and April, then the deciduous trees won't be in leaf. So have you taken that into account in terms of coming up with some kind of landscaping that actually would hide the scoreboard during the season, while the games are being played?
Well, we propose a mixture of both conifers and deciduous trees to help with that screening, but a mix of trees that would add the landscaping throughout the season.
Right, except that the problem is that the scoreboard is going to be used mostly during a time when the deciduous trees aren't going to provide any screen. So, how do you respond to the resident who has the bedroom windows looking out at the scoreboard, which can't be screened by the landscape that you're showing right now?
We could line up our evergreen trees in a way that helps provide that screening for them.
I think that would be a better idea.
We'll be happy to revise or adjust our plans as necessary to make that adjustment.
Alderman Holmes?
One of the residents mentioned from around 1 o'clock to dusk. Does that mean that there are no nights games, right? Oh, okay.
That's correct, Alderman.
Okay.
One of the residents mentioned more games, I believe, than you had, unless I misheard what you had said. What is the average number of games, home games in the season?
We have about 18. I think the resident mentioned 19, so I think.
Oh, okay, I misheard the
she
resident.
combined the baseball and the softball.
But it's relatively the same.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? It is in for introduction. It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor to move this to council, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are those opposed?
I have a question.
I would support moving it to council, but I would like to see the new landscape plan.
I agree. I'd like to see a new landscape plan.
Okay.
I'll support moving it to council, but I want to see a new landscape plan.
Okay, with this, we'll move to council. Thank you. Alderman Mark Munzer, question for
Not Alderman, Director of Community Development. Just prior to action, so you want to see it between now and then. You want it in the next packet, correct? Thank you.
Are there any other comments or items of business or communication? If not, I move adjournment.
So moved.
Thank you.